Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Soul Goals. So glad you're joining us today. I have a dear friend from, we just said this before I hit the record button, 2009. 2009 is when we met. Golly. And I don't know if you, I'm going to give you my experience because it's mine. And this is interesting as to how we met. I signed up for a retreat that Miss Tammy was going to be doing in Oceanside, California. Super excited about it. A women's retreat. There was a handful of us. I had met 0 people that I was going to travel from Nashville to Oceanside and stay for 7 days with and do very vulnerable work on myself from my past stuff. And I didn't know the retreat leader. I just heard about you and I'd heard about all the wonderful things that you've done and all the kind of the path that you were embarking upon and what these retreats encompassed. And I was like, man, I feel like I really need that. I need to connect in a way where I feel supported by other women and just feel really, really compelled to do some good, deep healing work, which is, I don't know a lot of people that are like, let's do that. Let's do that work. I'm a goofball that way. I love it. I love it. But I think I met you for the first time at the airport or some faction of that. Or when I first got to the house, I was like, okay, connected with you immediately. And since 2009, we've woven in and out of each other's lives. I have loved watching your transition because Tammy has been a trained psychotherapist for years. So she knows her stuff in terms of counseling and in therapy, has worked across numerous populations for multiple years in that facet. But the cool thing about Tammy is the transition into more of a holistic minded coaching that she's taken. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. In her postgraduate work, I know you focused on a lot of those different holistic kind of opportunities and things that you can offer others to help them dive a little bit deeper to connect with your soul. How about that? Connect with your soul. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Tremendous work, by the way, Tammy does. And she does these wonderful retreats. She's having one in October in Florida. There is still room available for it. So when we share this podcast, I'll make sure that we link all that information. I would invite anyone to consider doing this. Any woman, please, 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 please consider this. Look into it. It's a tremendous, tremendous gift to your soul, to your life, also to your loved ones. I mean, you do a really great job of holding space for others to do that work through creativity, through astrology, through meditation, subtle movement, dream work, you name it. There's so many different things. But again, I'll just go back to the thing that I really appreciated the most from you is the gentleness of your soul, the empathic side of you, and holding that space for myself and the other fellow women on the retreat to do our own personal deep work. So I am so glad to have you on the show today and talk a little bit more about what it is that you do now, where you came from and how you got to that point, because it wasn't always this beautiful, holistic minded, this is my path and this is what I'm doing. So I want you to be able to share your story of how you got from point A to where you are now. So without further ado, that was a very long intro. I'm glad you're here, Tammy. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
I love it. Love it. And you're in sunny Florida right now.
Yes.
I love it.
It's an area called the Forgotten Coast. So it's like stepping back in time and it's not developed. And yeah, it's great.
So it's nice. So you have all this space around you and lots of things to explore. Is that where the October retreat will be held?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Lots to look forward to there.
Yeah.
Yay. So let's just jump right in. As this skilled, trained psychotherapist, all the people that you saw, all the different genres that you encompassed, I mean, that's kind of your roots of helping people. But how did you know that this is really what you wanted to do? Because it's really hard work. You know what I'm saying? To connect with people and to listen to people's trauma and not take it on, but be able to assist them in a way that gives grace and gives space. So how did you know this was the path you wanted to take?
Well, actually, I had 15 years in corporate before.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was in corporate human resource development, and I just had this sense of like that. uh, I I could just always sense that whatever was going on in the workplace, that there were deeper roots that I wanted to get to, you know, and so I started volunteering at the women's prison, and before I just left the lucrative corporate gig,
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah,
Just
and
to kind of see if it was something that you were really like, this was a true belief, like, that was happening for you.
right,
Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, so I made started volunteering. I was like, "Yes, I wanna do work that feels a lot more meaningful,"
Mhm.
and, what I know now is that so many of us who go into the counseling profession we're just wounded healers. That I mean, that was really the biggest part of it, was going through all that training
Yeah.
forced me to do my own work, and that's never stopped.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and it's become a passion for you. So, how
yeah,
did you like I know a lot of people will go into those paths to go, "All right, this is a lot of work," but then they may decide it's too much. This path is it's heavy. It's
right.
heavy to be around that. How did you decide, like, make that distinction that this like, where do you separate yourself from that stuff, if you will?
Um, I early on, I understood energy,
Okay.
and so from the start, I was a holistic therapist before I got trained in being a holistic therapist. Like, I understood that we were, much more than just these meat suits and personalities and egos,
Yeah.
and so I had some ability to know to that part of my self-care was energy clearing and cleansing, and probably the biggest part of it is, I don't know, maybe it was my own. No, it wasn't denial. It was a, coping mechanism that was rooted in truth, is that I believe we come in with these soul contracts, that we choose these paths,
Mhm.
and so for, a few years, I worked at a youth shelter, and that was the hardest because these were not adults that, could make choice. A lot of these kids were stuck in situations that were just it was so hard, and so the way I was able to cope with that is believing in soul contracts and believing that, the hardest stories I heard were the strongest soul evolution stories. So,
Wow. Yeah,
um
it's almost like the bigger the stuff, the more advancement, and I'm not saying advancement from an egoic standpoint, but the more evolution your soul has to go through. And that
exactly.
sounds kinda deep, but I mean, there's a lot of truth to that if you sit down and really think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
And
that's been my belief through the whole process, and so I think that's why I've been able to do the hard work and not get bogged down by it.
yeah. And also, we think back to your beginnings and your stuff that you had to work through when you were in school for this, when you were in training for everything that you were becoming at that point. Um, in your youth, you had addictions that
Mhm.
were strong coping mechanisms that you had to take care of and you had to deal with. So, give me a little bit of that background. What was it that gave you that impetus to say, enough is enough? Like, how long did that story for you, that contract happen?
Yeah, well, it was not just my youth.
Mhm.
It Yeah, I was a practicing psychotherapist with a significant drinking problem, and there was so much shame that I carried with that. Um, so the addictive pattern started very young. I would say 8, 9 years old, it started with food.
Mhm.
And then when I got to be a teenager and it wasn't cool to be, focused on food, it shifted to cigarettes. And for some reason, I did not drink through my teen years, which
Okay.
is shocking to me.
Yeah.
Um, and I got married. The next addiction was relationships. I got married at 18,
Oh, wow,
and
Tammy, I didn't know that.
yeah,
Oh, wow.
and a very addictive pattern, and then when I got divorced at 25 is when I started drinking, and it was magic. I loved drinking so much because it was like what I'd been seeking forever. All of a sudden, I felt comfortable in my skin, and I was, I liked my personality, and, I was fun and all these things until I wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Until it stopped. And
Yeah.
then what are you left with? Like, and any addiction, like when we're in that high, if you will, it's
Mhm.
just so big and it's so, oh wow. Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah.
very cathartic. It's a friend that's not really a friend,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know?
And there were many years of I can't live with this and I can't live without it
Mm,
because I just literally was not comfortable in my own skin, in my own body. And and I was also miserable drinking, and not to mention how much shame went with it because I knew I was just, using it as a coping mechanism. Now I can see it with a whole lot of compassion, but at the time it was a lot of shame. So
yeah. Switching that lens from shame to compassion. I think that's a really big key that a lot of people have a lot of struggle with in therapy. I know
yeah,
I did. It's like you have so much shame for the things that you're doing to yourself and the things that you're using as those mechanisms and those addictions. And it's like, oh my gosh, I just feel like I just want to hide. Like I
mm,
just want to go underneath this rug.
yeah,
But if you can look at yourself with that lens of compassion eventually and go, I understand that the reason I did it was for this survival mode that I had to, I created it for a survival mode.
exactly.
Yeah. And
Yes.
I think it's hard to make that switch. But once you do, there's a really big piece of freedom in it.
Oh, yes, yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, and my path, and I think, I also worked as a clinical director at a women's treatment center for quite a while, and what I started really tracking and found was that women, I never have worked with men in addiction, but women, those of us who struggle with addiction are the most highly sensitive, highly creative, highly empathic,
Yeah.
and it's like, well, of course we found something to know because it's, especially those of us of a certain age, it was never cool to be that,
Yeah.
it
Yes.
wasn't safe to be that in our family of origins, usually not safe in the culture. And so of course we numb it down. And so the beauty is once we get in touch with that compassion for ourselves and then start honing, like then what we get to focus on is, oh, I'm intuitive, empathic, creative, highly sensitive, and not in a bad way. It's like it's so rewarding.
Yeah,
Just
it's like, what's the truest parts of yourself? And
right.
then you can really embrace them. And,
Yes.
at the risk of sounding kind of parenting, be proud of them. Yeah.
Yes.
Be proud of
Yes.
who you are and that person that you are. And I wanna kinda go back, do you think that as a youth and counseling youth and looking at the youth in those ways that the situations that they brought in that you were having to help them through, that some of them were so big or some of them weren't even belonging to them, maybe their history that they couldn't really conceptualize how to process it. I mean, do you think that there there's so much lack of safety where that's concerned? How do you how did you help youth to get to that point where they could understand it's okay to not be okay?
Well, I mean, I think the most important thing I could do was just to see them in their what, if it was sensitivity, creativity, and then also acknowledge that most of the world does not see and value that. So, just stating hard truths
Yeah.
like don't ever lose this part of yourself. And I know it's not easy to be
Yeah.
this sensitive and, highly attuned.
Yeah. It's not the popular well, it's like you said, it's not it wasn't the in thing to do. It wasn't the cool thing. Like,
Right.
it's not okay. Do you feel like women now, like the ones that you are working with in your retreats and in small group stuff that you do you feel like there's a shift now where there's a little bit more believability, a little more buy-in from them in terms of, okay, I accept myself a little more readily, a little more sooner than fighting upstream to try to figure that out?
Yeah, I think there's definitely has been a shift in the culture of embracing our, creativity, our intuition, all those things.
Yeah. And your retreats focus specifically on those aspects too.
Yeah, the retreats, they always have a different theme or topic, but there's always a core of that. What we're going to be doing on the retreats is giving you time and space to go within and listen to your own soul. And that's going to, the techniques that we get there are through creativity and, energy based processes, that kind of thing. So it may be yoga one retreat and family constellations in another, but it's always just different paths to get to the same destination.
Right. And in that way, you're helping people figure out what their path to um, healing their triggers, healing their trauma really is, because we're not all the same. And
No,
how we process is so different, obviously. But what a really cool thing that you're doing to help people get to, hey, if this doesn't work, this might work.
right, right.
Yeah.
And yeah, the interesting thing about retreats, because I've done a lot of different things through the years, but I've been consistent with retreats since 1999.
Oh,
And um, and I actually, in when I was in graduate school, I arranged to where I could do an independent study and create, deliver, market a retreat, and I got that approved.
okay.
And it was 15 years later, I'm like, why in the world why did I do that? I'd never even been on a retreat.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
yeah, and so I really dropped into that. I'm like, "What's that about?" And I discovered that there is a retreat archetype, that some of us just carry this energy of holding space for people to go deep.
Yeah.
And as soon as I heard about, I'm like, "That's me." That like I
100%.
Yeah, and so that is something that will just always be a part of what I do, because I know how important it is. And if you think historically, there was the red tent, there was temple time. There's
Mhm.
always historically been places that women go to be quiet and together and nurture self, nurture each other, and we just really don't have that much anymore.
Right. That's a great point. And to that point, let me just ask you, how do you bridge that? Like, what do you think the solution is to that, to creating that? Because man, there's nothing like a really good connection with a good girlfriend, with a really dear female friend that you can say that you really just you get. And you have those relationships in your life, but I'm talking like the support of that group and that being able to teach them how to hold the space for other people so that they can then also do their own healing in it too.
I mean, I think it's one of the hardest things that I teach is that, I mean, it's all feminine principles, spaciousness, slowing down, going within. All of that goes totally against our culture. And so we're just, swimming upstream on those topics all the time. So it's truly a matter of um it we've got to shift the culture, and it's got to start within, and you've got to be
Mhm.
willing to disappoint people, to
Mhm. Yeah.
because it's not just a I mean it doesn't need to be like a vacation. Oh, I go on retreat once a year. The ultimate is to then breathe that energy into your life.
Yes.
And that's where I see so many women, they just go back to the same lifestyle, and then 3 months, 6 months later, they're like, oh, I want that feeling back again. And it's like, well, that's where it really takes commitment, and as much as anything, willing to disappoint people.
Wow. That's a big, huge mic drop moment right there. Like you talked a little bit ago about hard, fast facts. That's it.
Yeah,
That's a fact.
yeah.
Yeah. It's really hard for women. I had this conversation earlier today with one of my friends about the difference between we were talking about parenting because of both of us had kids and how our husbands parent versus how we parent in the emotional connection versus if it's a boy or a girl or but that whole the connections are there, but they're different. But for so many of us moms, it's such a huge feel like I have to take care of, feel like I have to go. I have to be on the go. I got to make sure this is taken care of. And it's a lot of emotional gymnastics that we're doing
Right.
on a regular basis. So I love what you're saying about the retreat idea, knowing that what you learn when you're there and that feeling that they get when they're there,
Mhm.
how do you breathe that into your home life and into your family living, your space, so that, like, I mean, when you're around people and you are exhibiting that, there's a piece of them that, like you said, either is going to be disappointed or they're going to say, "Hey, maybe there's something to this." There's a real peacefulness about her that I want to feel that. How do
Right.
you get to that?
Right. And that's the thing. There's got to be a willingness to disappoint in the beginning, but ultimately the payoff is for everybody because when mama's cup is full, everybody benefits. There's an overflow.
Yeah.
But that first part of being willing to disappoint, like, no, I'm not going to do that tonight, or no, just saying no. And people get over it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
us that usually are the ones carrying it around, not them.
Yes. Yes, you're right. It is so us that hold on to that feeling. But
Yeah.
gosh, you know what you're talking about so much is safety and vulnerability to really, and trust, like trust as well, trusting yourself and feeling safe enough to go to the vulnerable layers that you need to be able to unhook stuff
Right.
that you maybe have stuffed down.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
golly, I love it. I want to go back and talk a little bit more about, you're also an author and you have two wonderful books out, and they're based on your trauma and your coping mechanisms. The first one you wrote, when did you write High Bottom? Has that been a few
Uh,
years ago?
yeah, 2014, 10 years ago.
Okay. So High Bottom, it's called High Bottom, Letting Go of Vodka and Chardonnay, is about your experience with alcoholism and being a high functioning alcoholic.
Right.
But
Yes.
tell me a little bit more about the book.
Well, it's a real short, quick read about my journey of acknowledging because, I didn't match the profile of, air quotes, alcoholic because I hadn't lost anything. I hadn't, but I was miserable. I was absolutely miserable and near suicidal because I was so miserable. And so that was the hardest part, was being like, but I don't fit the profile of what I thought an alcoholic was. And so then making the choice, to live, to really live. And then I just wrote about the journey of that. And I mean, in all transparency, part a big part of why I wrote the book was I knew I had enough pride that if I put a book out, that I would stay sober.
Yes.
And and
Yeah.
yeah,
It
and
is something to that. Yeah.
now, I mean, it didn't take long that I stayed sober because I love being sober and I loved all the things I was reclaiming, like the creativity and intuition and all that.
Yeah.
But at the time, I was just like, well, if I say I'm going to do it, this will be a way to do it.
Yeah. It's your accountability factor, if you will.
Right. Right.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
acknowledgement. I love that you wrote it as an acknowledgement of what you were doing. Like, this is my journey. And I think too, being able to share that. So we're going back to the vulnerable world word, sharing that so vulnerably is, and coming clean with that after being in a space where, like, no one would guess that this is you.
Right. Right. But there was so much shame that it was like, if I just cleansed myself and said, yeah, here's what I've done,
Uh-huh.
like, it was so liberating. And then there was nothing anybody could, like, I wasn't a bad person. I had bad coping skills and I had a bad history that needed to be numbed out. So,
Yeah. How did you work through that history as you became sober?
well, that's what the second book was.
Yes. The second book is called New Bottom, Turning the Other Cheek.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it was about really, the second book was about acknowledging traumatic history that I didn't know. I didn't really even know I had a traumatic history.
Yeah.
There was so much denial, like, oh, we were normal. Well, normal is not healthy, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So and it was also a process of forgiveness of myself, of family members, it's the culture, all kinds of
Right.
forgiveness, and it's just like, yeah, it's part of the journey, and now I'm here to really live my life and feel my feelings and not eat them or numb them or
How many years sober are you now?
15.
Oh, congratulations, Tammy.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a big deal. It's a
Yeah,
big deal. And addressing the triggers and the layers that come up, that because I've also have told people in the past that I've worked with, I'm like, I don't think that trauma and the layers stop. I just think it's we learn to evaluate, reconfigure, move with, flow with, um, understand, and gain perspective from a whole different vantage point when
right.
we dive into our therapy about why it is that these addictions were created, the things that we went through, the stuff that we did to cope, to save ourselves. That was my story
Yeah,
that I had to do.
yeah. Yeah, and I think I agree. I don't think it ever really stops. It's just, I think of healing being on a spiral. We just keep spiraling, but it's not in a circle. We just keep going deeper and deeper.
Yeah.
And with each layer that we get to is more freedom.
Yeah.
So I've just gotten to the point now that when I encounter, it's like, I thought I worked on this. It's like, well, it's just another layer of it. So that means there's going to be more freedom. And, there's the dysfunctional family history, but we live in a dysfunctional culture. And
Totally.
yeah, so there's just so much internalized from how our culture is. So yeah, so I'm just to this point of like, okay, it's never ending. It's okay, but
Yeah.
there's just layers of freedom yet to come.
I love that philosophy, layers of freedom, because I can tell you probably the exact date I was sitting in the therapist's office going, when does this freaking end? When does this end? When do I I actually said, when do I graduate? Like, when do I graduate? And she just sat there, took a deep breath. She was a great therapist. And she was very, very aware of her words and her reactions. And she's like, we don't graduate until we pass on.
Right.
It's your path. It's your choice. It's your choices that shift. And I was like, okay, well, dadgum, more work, another layer. But
Yeah.
the freedom, but the freedom that we do experience when we uncover and unearth another piece and go, all right, I can do that. I
Mhm.
got tools. I'm a little bit more aware than I was when the last trigger happened. Okay. So I'm interested to know how it is that you got to a point where you said these fine skills of the dream work, the astrology, the meditation, all of those more holistically minded facets came to you and was like, this is really my forte to help people. And this is really what I want to show people is accessible to them. Tell me when all that really came to you as this is what I need to do.
Well, I mean, those kind of things had always been a part of my practice from day one. I got trained in Reiki, which was like the gateway to everything else when I was still in graduate school. But it had just always kind of been an add-on to my practice. And I would always get excited when somebody new would come and I could sense like, oh, they're going to like this stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And then one day I still remember I was getting ready one morning and I was so excited because I was going through my schedule in my mind. And it's like, oh my gosh, everybody I meet with today, we're going to be doing dream work. We're going to be doing soul work.
Yeah.
And it hit me. It was like, well, if I believe in this level of work so much, why am I not doing it all the time?
Yes.
and that was it. It was like I shifted from traditional psychotherapy to saying I was a soul coach.
Mhm.
And then when I moved to Florida, I did not renew I retired my license, so that made it really, really official. That
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. How do people that don't know about these capacities, how do they receive some of your gifts and some of the things that you're offering in these retreats when they show up? Say somebody that doesn't know a lot about meditation, doesn't know a lot about the astrology that you practice with them as well, the family constellations stuff, all of those different holistic minded ways. How do they receive it? What, like, do you see that shift on them, or do you see hesitancy?
Well, I always talk to
Mhm.
people before the retreat. I do a screening because to me, there's nothing worse than somebody showing up and not being comfortable and that's not fair to them or the other people in the retreat.
Sure.
So, um, so I'm pretty fortunate that every retreat is people that are really open to these approaches. Um, and I've had some people apply to a retreat, and when I'm talking, it's like they don't really get it, but they're interested. So then what I would do is be like, well, let's have some sessions before the retreat. So it's always about making sure that people are really comfortable and dropped in when they get there.
Right. Yeah, you want the best experience for everybody that's involved.
Exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely. Before you hit the record, it was funny you said something. This is all happening whether we're aware of it or not. So why not just accept it, dive in? It's
Yeah.
gonna happen whether we're aware of it or not. You were talking about astrology, but I mean, I can link that saying to pretty much anything that you're saying here.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, if you think about like we have this ego and personality that is moving through the world, but we're also all energetic beings with souls that have a soul path, whether you're aware of it or not.
Yeah.
Like and that also depends on your worldview. But my lens is that absolutely we are souls having this human experience. So we're
Yeah.
spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I love that whole aspect too. It's a really broad thing to kind of a concept, if you will, to think through. But when you get to that point of it, there's a piece of freedom for me too when I got to that point where I understood what that meant for me.
Yeah, because like the minute details just aren't nearly as important.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's another mic drop moment right there, Tammy Roth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then if we go back even to what you were saying about creating some people are gonna be disappointed when you set your boundaries and you say, "Hey, I'm gonna make this choice instead of this choice," when they're used to you being a certain way or a different way,
Right.
same thing,
Yeah,
same.
absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, so tell me what a typical day in the life of a retreat for you might be. Now, I know you said you offer multiple different types of retreats. So specifically, let's go for the one that you have coming up in October.
Okay.
What would a day look like? So someone could say, "Oh, that sounds like I might be interested in knowing more about that."
Yeah. So one really important aspect to retreats for me is recognizing that we all are, come in with different energetic makeups, some introverts, extroverts, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so my approach is you are the expert of you. And this is a place to start practicing being willing to perceive that you might be disappointing somebody, but so being willing to really listen to your own energy body and take care of you. So right off the bat, that is a ground rule of you do not have to show up to everything, and really honor your own soul's calling.
Yeah.
um,
You are the expert of you. I like that so much.
Yeah, because if you're really new to this kind of work, it can be overwhelming. You need more time to integrate. Somebody else might be like, oh my gosh, I'm, starved. Give me more.
Yeah.
But a typical day is, breakfast like between 7:30 and 8:30. And then we have our first circle at like 9 o'clock, and whatever the process is, setting intention, sharing, because there's always going to be a sharing component about, just revealing who you are and what your intentions for being there.
Yeah.
And so this one that's coming up is family constellation work. And so then each person will get their own constellation done, and everybody else participates in it. We will also spend some time in the afternoon, if you so choose, doing a creative process at the canvas. And this isn't about creating art. It's about just expressing creativity and just taking it to another level to see what wants to come through. And that's one of my favorite parts, because so many people show up and they haven't ever painted.
Yes.
And all the people that say, oh, I'm not creative. Well, guess what? We all are. And we're
Yes.
all creating all the time. It's
Yeah.
just, this is a chance to consciously create and be with your creativity. And then, there's plenty of time for beach walks and naps. And sometimes I do a retreat just called Temple Time Retreat,
Okay.
where there is no schedule. It's just bringing women together and allowing me to cook for you and put a few structures in place. And that's been some of my favorite, because these women nap so much
Yeah.
because we're freaking exhausted.
And we're not just talking just physically. We're
Right.
talking emotionally, mentally, spiritually, all the things. And I
Yeah.
know there are women listening to this that absolutely can relate to that. 110%.
Yeah. So it's amazing what being in the quiet of nature with the ocean outside the door, no crowds, a beautiful night sky, healthy whole food,
Yes.
and naps and books and laughter, irreverent freaking laughter is so
Yes.
healing. Yeah. So those things are built into all retreats, like
Okay.
permission to be you, be irreverent, have fun, and take care of yourself in whatever way that is.
You know, something really interesting is if I think back to 2009 and my experience with you for the first time on the retreat, everything that you said was a part of that.
Mm,
It's still a part of that. So it has stood the test of time. So clearly this is your archetype, or our archetype rather. This is
right.
what you need to be doing. It's very, I remember, and I want to visit the creating, being expressive and creative and saying that I don't do that kind of thing. Once we got back from the retreat and a handful of us would meet together and you were a part of that,
Yeah.
we would paint. We would just get together and just paint.
Yeah.
I'm not like the last thing that I would paint was like in kindergarten, finger painting, I guess, or painting the walls of my house. But there is something so cathartic about picking up a paintbrush and just having all these colors in front of you and just putting a mark on a canvas
Yes.
and just going, where's it going to go now? And I mean, everything just quiets down. And the beautiful thing about quieting the mind is that you can then hear the information coming up from your soul, the things that you really are and you're supposed to be hearing.
Yes. Yes. I mean, it is absolutely an active meditation that will reveal things. I mean, the canvas will reveal so much.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
So you weren't always an artist, were you? Was that something that you did early on?
No, no, no. That was
When did you
something
find that?
when I got sober.
Okay.
Yeah. I
Wow.
needed, one of my beliefs about recovery and sobriety is that I didn't want to focus on the addiction. It's like, well, I already knew about that. I want to
Mm.
focus on what I want to create in my life. And I knew that I could feel the creativity just wanting to burst out of me, but I'd been taught that, oh, we're not creative people.
Yeah.
Um, and so the very first painting class was with somebody I'm still very connected with and we co-create together, Whitney Freya. She was in Nashville at the time, and I took a painting made easy class, and it was these basic concepts of, we're not here to create a product, we're here to express and let the canvas just be a mirror for what's going on inside. And I mean, I've never stopped, and not because I want to be an artist, but because I am a creative being. And
Yeah. And I think too, it speaks to a lot of unhooking from this modern day belief that has been created, that we feel this construct that we've created for ourselves, that we have to be this, we have to fit in this box. This is what this has to look like. I love what you said about, I was not creating a product, I was creating to express. And that's about being you, and if a product comes from it, so be it.
right.
But that's not your drive. And I think the unhooking, the beautiful thing about these retreats that you offer, and all of the offerings that you do, the session work that you do as well, is that unhooking from those belief patterns that are so strong in
Yes.
our culture, very
Yes.
strong. And the gift that giving space creates in our life, to us being able to then go back into our lives and say, that works, that doesn't work, that works, figuring out what works and what doesn't work for you.
Right. Right. And I think having a community of people who desire to live in a different way to keep connecting with, and because it's easy to be like, oh, I'm just crazy, I'm idealistic. But when you're around people, it's like, no, we are living in a world that is desperately craving change.
Yes.
And so it's up to us. Like, we've got to be willing to break out of these old patterns and do things in a new way.
Yeah.
And we are the ones that are going to create a new world. Like, it's not going to be dropped down for us to receive. Like, it's up to us.
Right. Yeah. We have to make those choices.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to make those choices when you're not armed with the information that you are enough, you already are capable, you have it inside of yourself. And it's just quieting things down enough to be able to hear that information. I know I've said that just a little bit ago too, but it's just so vital, in our go, go, go. And I'm super guilty of that. I'll call myself out on that all day long. Go, go, go. It's the construct of the framework of my household at this point. But when I do manage to take time and carve out, I don't know, 15 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, once a week, maybe twice a week, maybe once a day, whatever I can do in that piece of time that I'm in, it changes my delivery within my life to other people. It changes my delivery to myself.
Yeah.
And how I feel about myself.
Yeah. And I don't think everybody has to be slow and monk-like. I mean, we do live in modern, fast-paced worlds. It's just like being present to our life. And if you have a fast-paced life, doing it because you have chosen it, not because you're a victim of it, So I don't see anything wrong with, like, speed doesn't matter. It's just how much are you taking responsibility for choosing and loving what you're doing and being present to it.
Oh, yes. Yes. Yes, 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 yes. Tammy, like, so much. Yes. If I had a huge sign, I need a neon sign. Yeah. Totally. You're speaking my language. I love it. I love it. Tell me how your life has changed since you have made those conscious choices to step outside of the lucrative income before you became a therapist, to then stepping outside of the therapy box and going to the holistic coaching realm, to where you are now and the existence that you have, helping the people that you're helping.
Yeah. Well, for me, it has been just this continuous process of slowing down. And that's where the astrology really comes in for me, is because I feel like our birth chart, like, it's all right there. And mine is very much gives me permission to be the hermit, quiet, person that my soul desires.
Yeah.
And that's not for everybody. That's why I love astrology, because we can look at somebody, if we looked at yours, it probably would be like, no, you don't need to be a hermit. You need to
Right.
go.
Right.
And so my life, I feel like my life has just been these phases of coming more in alignment with my own soul.
Mhm.
And it has been breaking away from all, I mean, just like you've already said, all these belief systems
Mhm.
that, I mean, I was just saying to my husband the other day, we were in Colorado hiking in the mountains, and I said, wonder what it would have been like if at 17, when I graduated from high school, I just went and like moved to a mountain town and spent time in nature and did things like that, instead of at 17 I put on pantyhose and pumps and went to work at a high rise in Nashville.
Yeah.
And it was so deeply programmed in me to be successful. I was 17 years old, for goodness sake. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
like that was, I mean, I'm a product of the 60s, and it was like, get a good job, stay there 30 years, be productive. And
Right.
so my undoing has been about, don't be so, getting rid of perfectionism and productivity.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, that's great. I want to go back to the astrology that you talked about, because I think that feeds into where you're talking about getting rid of the perfection and all the different things that we have incorporated, kind of put on top of our natal being, if you will, and kind of who we are at birth, and what's happening when we come into this world, and what the makeup of our DNA is. Because that was something we were talking about too before we hit the record, is that DNA that we have, that cellular DNA, if you will, is it's going to happen whether whether we're aware of it or not. That's what you were talking
right,
about.
right.
So, I mean, understanding it is so it gives so much power to you and your existence, to knowing yourself better and
Right.
understanding yourself more.
Right. I mean, it's truly, it's a big permission slip to be you. And I think that's one of the problems with our culture now, is we're so homogenized and everybody's just trying to be like a certain model. And it's like, oh my gosh, if we just all showed up uniquely as ourselves, wouldn't that be remarkable?
Right? Right. It really would be, but the fear factor is so strong for so many people. So
Right.
strong.
Yeah.
Wow. What are you doing in the realm of astrology now? I know you said that's something that you've really been diving into a lot deeper in the last couple of years.
Yeah. Because of what I just said, like I've just seen how it's like, oh my goodness, if we could just, you know, get in touch with this blueprint that we came into the world with. And I view it as, there's two parts to it. We have the natal blueprint that like is the essence of who we are. And
Okay.
so, going through that and really owning, yeah, this is who I am, and I'm going to embrace it, even though it doesn't match the cultural norm.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then there is the transits that happen, because the planets, continue evolving. They never stop. And so there is an evolutionary process that we have a roadmap. We can look and see when things are going to be coming up in our own evolution. And if we
Yeah.
work with it, that's the thing I've seen, is that astrology is absolutely working with us when we choose to work with it. It's not here to kick our butts.
Yeah.
It's remarkable. And so what I'm doing is I've through the family constellation work, I discovered that you can really experience your astrology chart instead of just learn about it through the left brain.
Okay.
And I think that's why so many people have a hard time. I've known so many people that are like, oh, it's just so hard to learn. And I was one of those people. It's like, I've studied and studied and I can't retain this. Well, it's a holistic system that is, I don't believe, meant to be learned just through the left brain. So
Yes.
what I'm doing is taking people through a year-long cohort where you experience your chart through an energetic process, and you learn the signs and the planets, all these symbols, by you through creativity,
Okay.
painting, the signs and symbols, you're using your right brain. The
Mhm.
right brain sees things holistically. The left brain are, parts.
Yes.
And the chart is a holistic blueprint. So
Yes.
that I'm doing individual sessions, but the thing I'm passionate about is teaching other people to learn their own astrology instead of being dependent on the person, because you
Yeah.
can go to 15 astrologers and you're going to get a different reading from each one because it's so complex.
Right. Right.
And I'm not against going for readings, but you need to understand your own so you can be like, that doesn't feel true to me. Like
Yeah.
when I have experienced my Mars in Pisces, it feels like this,
Yes.
So,
Well, it's owning who you are. You said that a little bit ago. I love that statement. It's owning who you are
yeah.
and
And you
knowing
can't deny it.
and empowering yourself with that information.
Right.
And that's a whole other schlepping of a layer of stuff because it's really getting to the heart of what makes you tick.
Right. Right.
And then you take that information and you can impart that into your relationships. Like, how cool is that? Like, if
Yes.
you know that this is a trigger for you, then you can give your partner that information.
Right.
You can
Right.
say, hey, this is where I'm at. This is what's going on with me. This is what I'm feeling. And a lot of that is based on that owning who you are by knowing who you are.
Right.
Yeah, at the
And
fundamental form.
yeah. And it gets even more exciting when you can compare your chart with your partner's chart. And all of
Yes.
a sudden you see, like for me, I saw that my Uranus, which is the great awakener and likes to shake shit up, the Uranus is on top of my husband's North Node, his soul's trajectory. And
Okay.
so for 30 years, I've been holding back, and it's right there in the chart. No, I'm here to shake things up.
Yeah.
And so I'm doing it.
It's your permit. Like you said that earlier too. Permission slip. It's your
Yeah.
permission slip.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
So I love the charts because every time I find something new, it's something already new, but I had
mhm.
been pushing away.
Oh, hey, I think there's a book in you on this.
uh,
Not lying. Just
I
saying.
get pretty passionate about it.
Yeah. No, I mean, even more than just the passion, I think there's a real creative piece that you can bring that's an understandable, relatable explanation for it.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part. That was another thing I had a conversation with a girlfriend a couple weeks ago about how do we relate to other people and how do we give people what they can receive, but also being honest about what it is that we need to express,
Right.
but meeting people where they are in a really relatable way so that we make the relationship more stronger, more fulfilling, more endearing, what fill in the blank, whatever it is that you're hoping for in that relationship.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of truth bombs back there bouncing around the back of your head that it's like right there with that. I think it would be great. I would read it all day long. I would love that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. The chart is just a big old map of truth bombs. That's it. They're all right there.
there you go. There you go. Where do you see yourself, say, 5 years from now?
Well, that's one of the things I most love about astrology is because I think it can carry me through the rest of my life because there's just so much to it.
Yeah.
So right now I'm in the beginning stages of this teaching other people to learn astrology in a new way.
Mhm.
And I feel like 5 years from now, I hope to be talking about, Dawn, remember that time when I just gotten started with this? Well, look where it is now. Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll be revisiting this in the podcast in the next year. I love
Yeah.
it.
Great. That would be
Let's
great.
do it. Yeah. Okay. Before I let you go for the day, I would
Mhm.
love to throw some rapid fire questions your way and just show a whole other side of you, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Just 4 or 5 of them. So here we go. And I will warn you, I said this to my last guest. Like, rapid fire questions aren't usually very quick. So
Okay.
they can be like 3 to 5 minute long. Yeah. But I digress. It's all good. All right. Question number 1. What is your favorite animal and why?
Oh, I love dogs so much. I
Oh,
just love, and right now is the first time since 1996 that we've been without a dog. So right now I'm especially in love with dogs. I don't know why I love them so much. They're so they have such unique personalities and
Yes.
yeah, they're just wonderful.
Do you feel like there's another one in your future?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. It's just taking just taking a pause and really letting it come to us.
ah, yes. Yes. Told my family that the other night because they're like, we need to get another dog because our older dog she's getting older. She can't play with our younger dog as much. And like the younger dog deserves a buddy that can play. And I'm like, dude, like let's not press this. We need to wait.
Yeah.
Hold, hold, please. Hold, please. But yeah, I love a sweet puppy.
Oh,
Nothing like it. Nothing like it. Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Question number 2. What has been your favorite age so far?
I am pretty darn excited about right now.
Okay. Present moment.
Yeah, and I turned 60 in a couple of months, so
Oh,
I'm like 60 is feeling pretty darn good.
well, for those of you that can't see this, that are not watching the YouTube link, you look amazing
Oh,
for 59 years old. Just gonna say, I just
yeah,
telling you, you're living right. And there's something to be said for this holistically minded way of understanding, relating, and kind of following your life. It looks like Tammy Roth right there.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Question number 3. What dish do you cook the best?
I love to make a good salad because they're
Okay.
just so colorful and there's so many different I could have a month of salads and never have 2 the same. So
Oh,
that may not be exciting to other people, but I love fresh veggies.
yeah. Well, it's a creative process too.
Yeah.
That
Yes.
was one of my favorite things. I mean, outside of the space that was held for me when I went on that retreat with you in
Mm.
California those years ago, was like getting cooked for, like,
Yeah.
and having that sustenance with other women that was prepared, that the food was prepared with so much love and intention. And I know some people may think that's hokey, but it's so true,
No.
guys. So true.
No,
You,
that is the energy going into food, and it is. And I do have a little story. I've always believed that, but I was at the turnip truck in Nashville, and when it very first opened in the Gulch, and there was the food bar, and I would go in there, and I would just get roasted vegetables, and they were the best I'd ever. And I was like, "What in the world are they sprinkling on this?" And the chef came out and I was like, "Tell me, what are you doing?" And he said, it was this older man, and he put his hand on his heart. He said, "My grandmother taught me to never cook without intending for it to be filled with love, and that's what you're tasting." And I
oh,
was like, "I believe you."
I think I know who you're talking about too, because I used to go there for lunch when I worked in that area. And the chef would periodically come out and just kind of peruse. And it wasn't like he was looking to refresh his dishes. I think he was just watching the people.
Yeah,
And you just feel that intention around it. Yeah,
yeah,
it's true.
it's true. It's frequency. It's a vibration. It's
Oh,
powerful.
so
Yeah.
true. So true. Oh, love it. All right. Question number 4. Do you have a bucket list?
I don't. I've fulfilled it last year. Alaska was the last thing on it. And,
Okay.
but well, I've had surfing on my list for decades, and yeah, that could still. It doesn't feel as important, but
Yeah.
I would still take a round at surfing if I got the chance.
Oh, that sounds exciting.
Yeah,
Whereabouts do you think you would go? You'd wanna go for that?
Hawaii.
Oh, yeah. Hey, I'll go there with you.
Okay.
Do it.
Yeah,
Let's do it. Yeah, absolutely. Let's go surf together in Hawaii.
a
All about it.
surfing retreat.
Yes, let's do it. It's the next retreat. Next year. And
Yeah,
this time next year, 2025, let's do it.
I like it.
Yeah, you think I'm kidding.
Yeah,
I'm
I know you're not.
I'm not kidding. All right, last question, and I'll let you go. I know you have a busy evening ahead of you. The last one is a little bit more thoughtful. It's not such a rapid fire, so expand upon it as you want to. What do you think is the key to living a good life?
For me, it's being in integrity with my soul. And
Mm.
I mean, that's what that's what sobriety has been about for me, is just everything we've talked about today. It's like I've had to be willing to listen deeply to myself, and then I've had to be willing to disappoint the people around me who thought my trajectory, should be something different.
Yeah.
And I haven't lost anybody along the way,
Yeah.
or if I did, I've already forgotten about them.
Yeah. But those relationships shift for the better, I have
Right.
found,
Yeah.
and if they're not meant to be, they dissipate,
Right. Yeah.
you know?
And then, just really taking care of my body is,
Yeah.
I'm super sensitive to what I put in it. And so that's one of my levels of integrity is I'm going to eat what makes me feel good. I'm still an addict. I am addicted to feeling good.
Yeah.
And I will do what it takes for my body to just be humming. And that's what I feel like. I'm humming all the time. It feels
Oh,
good.
oh, I love it, Tammy. That's so beautiful. And it's taking the word addiction into the most positive frame and reframing that to a point where it's so viable and it's so integrous and it makes so much sense. Like, who doesn't want to feel good? And how do we get to that point of feeling good foundationally so that we can live that exceptionally?
Right. And when I think about how dedicated I was to my shadow addictions,
Yeah.
like nothing would keep me from, that 5 o'clock glass of wine or whatever it was. It's like, yeah, I am a dedicated person. So
Yeah.
I can dedicate myself to this higher way of living, and that's been my path.
Oh, it's a beautiful path and you're doing it very well. Happy early 60th birthday to you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And good luck on your retreat coming up this October. Like I said, when we release this podcast, we'll go ahead and link everything for you there too, so people can know a
Awesome.
little bit more about
I
how to
appreciate
connect
that.
with you.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Oh, gosh. All right. What do you have planned for the rest of your day?
Well, I do have a group tonight, meeting with a group of women about recovery topics.
Great.
And then hopefully I will get a bike ride or walk in somewhere.
That beautiful Florida air.
Yeah, it's pretty
Oh,
humid, but
well, yeah, there you
it's
go.
good. I like the humidity.
Love it. Love it. Tammy, it's been so good to talk to you and so good to connect with you again. Like I said, we just weave in and out of each other's lives, but I'm gonna like you again. Yeah, next year, let's go Hawaii. Let's go surf. Let's go retreat there.
Let's retreat. I love it.
Ah, let's do it. Thank you for creating space for others, and thank you for being authentically you, doing your work, and being this wonderful, beautiful light for everybody around you. It's
Oh, thank
awesome.
you. Thank you. And I love your podcast. So keep doing it because the interviews are fantastic. You are a great interviewer. So
Oh, thank you very much. I just enjoy the gift of gab. I like to talk.
yeah, you've got a gift.
Using my talking addiction in a positive way, hopefully. All right, Tammy, have a great rest of your evening. Enjoy that Florida air, and we will talk again soon. All right.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.